Have you ever wanted to make your own sourdough starter from scratch from the beginning? It is so simple. It's literally 2 ingredients for 2 weeks. And then you'll get an established, healthy, thriving sourdough starter. Hello family, welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. I am Vicki and you are with Grammy in the Kitchen. So this is a 2-week process of feeding and discarding your sourdough every day. All you need is flour and filtered water. Do not use tap water because some waters are high in certain iron or vitamins, or it's chlorine treated. You do not want that in your sourdough starter because it will prohibit it from causing the bacteria to get in there and to grow. So we're actually using filtered water. I have the Berkey right there. I'm using the Berkey water and an all-purpose flour. You know, I get my flour from Azure Standard, 50-pound bag. We put it in our 5-gallon bucket. We have 2 containers we keep in the kitchen. Whatever is left over from that 50-pound bag, we put in Mylar bags and put it in our back storage. If you're ready for the first day of homemade sourdough starter, let's go ahead and get started. So the ingredients are super simple. You need flour, filtered water, a glass container. I'm starting off using a wide mouth pint, and as it grows, we'll move it into a quart and then a larger container. But we can start off with this for the first maybe 4 days. After that, we have to move it into a larger container. I have a rubber band on the jar so I can measure how it rises and falls. Plus I have another rubber band that's going to go over a piece of cloth. This is an old napkin that I cut. And you want something that'll allow it to breathe without other things falling in there. So that's why we're using a cloth napkin and a rubber band. So to start off, we're just going to do 1/4 cup measurements. So the first day we're going to add a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour and a 1/4 cup of filtered water. Now the first 2 or 3 days we're not going to have any growth because it takes at least 3 days to 1 week for the bacteria to start getting established. We want to make sure we mix that very well. All of that flour is 100% hydrated and we do not have any dry spots. And I'm giving it a good scrape around the edges. And we're going to put our rubber band right to the top of that mixture. So there's our mixture and that's our rubber band. We have a clean piece of cloth that we're going to put right on top and a rubber band to seal that on there. And now we have the beginning of a sourdough starter. We're going to leave this on the countertop so it's well ventilated and the air can move around it and go in there. And then in 24 hours, we're going to feed our starter. We're not going to do any discard for the first 3 days, but we're going to feed it because we want to double what's in there. Now, if you want to do it by grams, that is fine. Just know what your grams are at the beginning and then just double that. Once we start discarding, when we take the old out, leaving a little bit, we want to make sure we have enough to double. So whatever we leave in there, if we leave, let's say, a 1/2 cup of starter, we need to make sure we're adding a 1/2 cup of new things in there. So it's a 1/4 cup flour and a 1/4 cup of water. You want to make sure you are able to double what you have in there until it gets established, which takes about 2 weeks. So this is day 1. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Day 2 of our sourdough starter. Now day 1, we had a 1/4 cup of water and a 1/4 cup of flour. So we have a 1/2 cup of product in here. We're not going to do any discard, but we want to make sure we add another 1/2 cup of product back in here. So we're just giving that a stir. So we're going to add a 1/2 cup of flour. Get that stirred into that sourdough. And we're going to add a 1/4 cup of filtered water. So we started off with a 1/2 cup of yesterday's sourdough, and we're adding another 1/2 cup because every day it has to be fed. Make sure we get that all mixed in very well. We'll make sure we're incorporating the old with the new. Give the edges a scrape so we can get a clear view of what we have in here. We're going to raise our rubber band to that edge. Put our cover back on. And then a rubber band. And that is all we're doing for day 2. We're not expecting any activity from our sourdough starter on day 2. Takes a good 3 or 4 days for it to start building that yeast and the bacteria it needs to grow. So that's why we're starting off with a small pint-sized jar. Once we get some activity, we'll move it into a quart-sized jar. And that's when we're going to start discarding. I know there are recipes out there for sourdough discards. We are still trying to establish our sourdough starter. We will not be able to use our discard because it hasn't been established yet. Once we get it established, that's when we can make the things from discard. Up until then, we are actually going to have to throw away the discard until we get it activated and matured. But that's the end of day 2. I'll see you tomorrow morning. So this is the morning of day 3 of our sourdough starter. But let me show you something. Now we put the rubber band at the very top of yesterday where we added another 1/4 cup of flour and another 1/4 cup of water. We have some activity. Can you see that? We have a good piece of activity going right there. That's very unusual to happen on day 2. Don't expect this on your sourdough. It will get there. Ours just got there quicker. So day 1 was a 1/4 cup of flour and a 1/4 cup of water. That gave us a 1/2 cup of sourdough starter. Day 2, we added another 1/4 cup of flour and a 1/4 cup of water. A 1/2 cup of addition. So that gave us 1 cup of starter. Now today we want to make sure we add a cup to our starter. Does that make sense? We're constantly doubling until we start discarding. So we have 1 cup of starter in here. Oh, it's got some stringiness to it. It's not quite boozy yet, but that's okay. But it is coming. Oh, I don't know if you can see. Let me see if I can move you. It's starting to stick together. I can see some activity, some bubbles in there. Since our starter is starting to have a little bit of activity, I'm going to go ahead and transfer it to our quart size mason jar, because we have 1 cup in here. If we add another cup, that will max out this jar and it won't have any room to rise and fall. So on day 3, let's just go ahead and move it over to a quart size wide mouth mason jar. Make sure we get all that goodness out. And we do want our rubber band on here. So we have 1 cup of starter. We need to add another cup to this. So we're going to do a 1/2 cup of flour and a 1/2 cup of water. So there's our flour. And water. We want to make sure we get the old and new incorporate together very well. Clean up our inside walls. If I see some dry patches. Let's move our rubber band to the top of that line, and that way we can keep track of the rise and the fall of this starter as the yeast gets activated. Cover it with a piece of cloth, rubber band that down, and that is day 3. Now I am a little shocked that we actually got activity on day 2. I thought for sure it wasn't going to start until day 3 or day 4. And we're just going to leave our sourdough starter on the countertop, and then tomorrow morning we'll do it all over again. But tomorrow is day 4. We will start discarding it because we don't want to keep doubling this recipe because we don't need that much starter. So we have 2 cups in here as of now. Day 1, a 1/4 cup of flour and a 1/4 cup of water. Day 2, we doubled that, 1/4 cup of flour and a 1/4 cup of water. Day 1, we ended up with a 1/2 cup. Day 2, we ended up with 1 cup. Day 3, we have 2 cups. Now that's not 2 cups per measurement. It's 2 cups worth of ingredients. If you were to read the side of this mason jar, actually at 1.5 cups. So day 4, we're going to start discarding. We just want to make sure we are doubling our starter every day. So we don't want to end up with 10 cups of starter and we have to add 10 cups of flour. That would be too big of a starter that we would need on a daily basis. So we are just going to start discarding and doubling what we have left. We're still not ready to make discard recipes yet. We'll get there. Be patient. So it's day 4 of our sourdough starter. Should have took a picture of it, but I did not. But I wanted you to know that at the end of day 3, it had risen about an inch. I was so proud of that. Now we do have some separation. If you can see, we have a water line right there. Don't worry, it is still okay. There's nothing wrong with it. You can see above that rubber band right there, that's how high it risen yesterday. So we have the starts of a very active sourdough starter. Now it's day 4. We're going to start discarding and throwing it away. We have a 1 cup measuring cup. We're only going to reserve 1 cup. Well, let's stir it up first. So we're going to stir it up, mix in that liquid and the solids back together. We're going to reserve 1 cup. And the rest we're going to throw in the trash. We're not even going to bother washing it or anything. It's perfectly fine. Let's put a reserved 1 cup back in there. A 1/2 cup of flour. And a 1/2 cup of water. Mix that in really well. Make sure we get the old and the new well incorporated. Wipe down our sides so we can have a nice window to keep track of our growth. I'm going to take a paper towel and just wipe the edge. Just move our rubber band to the top of our sourdough starter. Cover it. Put a rubber band on top, and that is it for day 4. If I see some rise in here this evening, I promise to take a picture of it and show you tomorrow. We're going to be doing this step for the next 9 to 10 days. Reserve 1 cup, discard everything else, add a 1/2 cup of water, 1/2 cup of flour, mix, tomorrow morning, repeat, repeat, repeat. And after a total of 14 days, from day 1 to day 14, we should have a beautiful, active sourdough starter. I'll see you tomorrow. Day 4 of the sourdough starter. I told you yesterday that if I saw any growth, I was going to take a picture of it. There really wasn't that much growth on day 3. But we do have a little separation. We have a water line in there. Don't think your sourdough has gone bad. It has not. That is just a natural occurrence in sourdough, because we are 100% hydration, which means it's equal flour to equal water. So that's just a natural phenomenon. So what we need to do first is measure out 1 cup of our starter, discard everything else, and then build on that 1 cup. Let's give it a good stir. It still doesn't smell yeasty or soury, so it is not ready. But we are 4 days, well, we're technically 3 days in. No, we're 4 days in. We're 4 days in. I forgot, today is the 5th. So this is our 5th day. So let's go ahead and measure out 1 cup. And the rest is going in the trash. Just using the same mason jar. Let's go ahead and add our 1 cup of starter back in. A 1/2 cup of flour. And a 1/2 cup of water. Mix that in really well. Make sure we don't have any flour pockets in here. Scrape the side walls so we can have a clear view of our sourdough starter. I'm going to wipe the rim down because I want to keep the top edge as clean as possible so the cloth will stay pretty clean. cloth going on. Oh, we forgot one thing. Let's raise our rubber band to the level of our sourdough. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and put the cloth on. And we're just going to leave this on the countertop or on the island. And we'll repeat the process again on day 6. If I do have any activity or rising of the sourdough starter, I will take a picture of it today. And I will post that tomorrow and show you what the end of day 5 looked like before we get started on day 6. Well, we are done for today for the sourdough starter. I'll see you tomorrow. So the last time I recorded was day 6. Because day 7 was the exact same thing. No activity, no growth. Day 8, I did switch it up. Instead of doing measuring, we went to weight. So I had the kitchen scale out with a bowl, and then I just weighed out 150 grams of the sourdough starter, threw the rest of it in the trash, put that 150 grams back in the same jar, added 75 grams of flour and 75 grams of water. You can fluctuate a gram or 2, but don't go any further than that. And I'm finding that doing it by grams, by weight, I'm actually getting better results. So today is actually day 11. So day 8, 9, and 10, we just repeated that process. Today is day 11. Let me show you what we have. That's where we started yesterday after we fed it. When we measured 150 grams of starter, 75 grams of water, 75 grams of flour, mixed that together. That was how much starter we had. 24 hours, we still have some activity. I did take a picture last night, and that was within 12 hours of feeding the sourdough starter. I'm going to insert a picture just to show you how much growth we got in 12 hours. So now it's day 11. We need to feed our starter. So I have the kitchen scaled, tiered out with the weight of the bowl. And I have it set on grams or kilograms. We need to measure 150 grams of sourdough. All right, I have 151. I'm going to throw the rest of this in the trash. Now we're going to put the, and I don't know if you can see this. Let me see. We have bubbles, and that is what we are looking for. It is alive and well. Let's go ahead and dump this 150 grams of starter back into our jar. Using the same bowl, we're going to measure 75 grams of filtered water. And I always go over. I'm at 76, so we're going to call it right there. Put that in our mason jar. And now we're going to measure 75 grams of flour. $76, close enough. Get that mixed in really well. Scrape the sides down so we can have a perfect clean window. Gets kind of gunky on the top, so I do like to try to wipe that down. There we go. Raise our rubber band to that level. Cover it with the rubber band. And that's the end of day 11 feeding. Now the reason we went from measuring to weighing, I'm going to give you an example. We were doing a half a cup of flour to a half a cup of water, and we went to 75 grams of flour to 75 grams of water. Let me show you the difference. That is 76 grams of water. And if you can see, that is our water line, and that is our half cup line. Now, if we were to go to the half cup line, that's actually 94 grams. So it's almost 20 grams more than what we need. Tear that off to zero. A half a cup of flour actually weighs 85 grams. So using the measuring system, our water and our flour are not equal. A half a cup of water weighs 94 grams. A half a cup of flour weighs 85 grams. So we have more water per weight than we do flour, and it's not going to be 100% hydrated. That's the reason we switched it up from measuring to weighing. We start off with 150 grams of sourdough starter, and we need to add the exact same amount of new feed to our starter. That's why we went to 75 grams of water, 75 grams of flour. That way we adding new to old equal weights. I hope that makes sense to you. By the end of day 10, we have activity. And if you smell your sourdough starter, it's starting to smell sour or fermented, boozy-like. And we know we have bacteria and yeast growing in our sourdough starter. Sourdough starter is a live organism, just like everything else that is living and breathing needs to be fed, and we have to feed it every day. Once we get a mature sourdough starter, we can use the sourdough starter and then feed it to keep it growing. They say that it's good luck to name your sourdough starter. I have not named mine yet, but if you have any suggestions on what I should name my sourdough starter, please leave a comment below. I want a cute, gravy in the kitchen kind of name. So give me some suggestions on what we should name our sourdough starter. And if you do have a good sourdough starter, and you know people who would like to have a mature sourdough starter so they don't have to go through the process of creating their own, share it. Share your sourdough starter with people who want sourdough starter. We are getting very close to having a mature sourdough starter. This is the end of day 11 of feeding hours. And if I have a huge activity tonight, I will take a picture of our sourdough starter and share it with you on the next clip. Day 12 for the sourdough starter. Thought I took a picture, but I did not. It rose that much yesterday to right there. But it still has a little bit in here. It hasn't deflated completely. But we're just going to use the same formula we've been using for the last couple of days. Weigh out 150 grams, throw everything else away, and then add 75 grams of flour and 75 grams of filtered water. Now our cloth napkin is starting to get a little icky. No worries, we'll keep it. It's not going to hurt anything. It's starting to have a slight fermented boozy smell. That's what we want. It's starting to smell really good. All right, 150. We're going to go ahead and throw the rest in the trash. Put that back in our jar. And now we're going to weigh out 75 grams of water. Let's add that to our jar. And now we're going to weigh out 75 grams of flour. Move the rubber band to the top of that mixture. Just cover it back up. So day 12 is done. So we'll see you tomorrow. Day 13 of our sourdough starter. We have activity. Last night it rose about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches above the start line. It's smelling, it's starting to get that sour smell, but it's not quite where I want it. It is active, it is growing. Bacteria and yeast has been building in it for almost 2 weeks. I won't be able to make bread until this weekend. Today is Tuesday, and I'm not going to be able to make sourdough bread till this weekend. But I'm going to take the opportunity for the next 3 or 4 days to double and triple and quadruple my sourdough. So I have a very large glass container, and it does not tell me how big it is. It's pretty big. And I've cleaned it, rinsed it, and let it air dry. I do not want to use a paper towel or a dish towel to dry it out because I don't want to add any bad bacteria or particles from those two items. So it air dried. We're going to weigh out what we have in here, and we're going to double it. So whatever the grams that's in this mason jar, we're going to double it with half the weight of flour and half the weight of water. Let's go ahead and get our starter stirred up. Oh, you can just see the bubbles in here. It's beautiful. I got a bowl tared off on the kitchen scale in grams. We're not going to do any discard this time. Looks like we have 320 grams. So we're going to add 160 grams of flour and 160 grams of water to double what our starter is. Can you see that? Look at the bubbles. Not sure if it's showing up, but we have a lot of bubbles in here in our large glass container. And now we're going to add 160 grams of water. It's kind of hard to see this upside down. We got 169. $161 will do just fine. Now we're going to weigh 160 grams of flour. $161 is perfect. Mix that in really well. Make sure we don't have any dry flour pockets. Perfect. I'm going to try to keep the rim of this container clean by not scraping the spatula on the edge. I do have a, what is it called? A pastry knife. We'll see how long that lasts. Because eventually I will go to scraping it on the edge. Clean the side walls. Make sure we have a very good window to see inside. Perfect. Need to see if my rubber band will fit that. Okay, I've got a very large rubber band. I think it came off some produce of some sort. Right, put that rubber band right to that top edge of our mixture. We're going to use the same cloth and rubber band to secure this top on. And now we have doubled our starter. And the reason we're putting it in a larger container and doubling the starter is so we can have enough to make a recipe and have extra to be able to add more flour and water and continue to grow sourdough. Plus, once we get enough in here, and we can make sour discard recipes. So for the next maybe 2 to 3 days, today's day 13, so day 14, 15, and 16, I'm probably going to be doubling the sourdough in here. So whatever's in here, we'll add the equal amounts. for 3 additional days until we get a nice, established, big sourdough starter. Now, if we kept it in the same quart-sized jar, you got to understand we only had about a cup of content. So if we added another cup to it, so that would be a half a cup of flour, half a cup of water, that would give us 2 cups. That's not a lot of room for it to do its growth. We can't go any higher than 2 cups because it's not enough room for expansion. And 2 cups is not really a lot when you want to make a sourdough recipe. Plus, not have enough in here to continue the sourdough starter. And we will never have enough to do a discard recipe, because if we're making bread 2 times a week, we will never get this big enough to do the things we want to do in our kitchen. So that's why we went with a bigger container, so we can have some room to double this recipe and have enough sourdough starter to make bread or any other sourdough recipe, plus have enough to make discard recipes. Do you understand what I'm saying? We want a lot of sourdough starter. And if our friends and family need a good established sourdough starter, we have a good established sourdough starter that we can now share with people. You don't need a lot to grow your own. You just need maybe a cup of sourdough starter to gift to someone, and then they can build on that. So I'll see you tomorrow on day 14. Day 14 of our sourdough starter. We did it 14 days, and let me tell you right now, it smells boozy, yeasty. It's got a sour smell to it. Oh, it's beautiful, family. It's absolutely gorgeous. But we're still trying to bulk it up and get a lot of starter from here. So yesterday, day 13, we had 320 grams of starter. We added 160 grams of water, 160 grams of flour. So we know we have 640 grams of starter in here. We don't need to empty it to weigh it. We know what we have. But I want to double this. So we're going to be adding 640 grams total to this starter. We're going to put 320 grams of water and 320 grams of flour. I have the 8-cup measuring cup on the kitchen scale tared off to 0. And now we're going to add 320 grams of water. Let's add the water to our starter. Stir that in. Now this is why we went on a bigger container, because we're doubling it and making a beautiful, huge sourdough starter. And we can do this as long as we multiply what's in there. So we have a bowl on the kitchen scale, tear it off to 0, and now we're going to add 320 grams of flour. .321's close enough. Now we're going to put this in our sourdough starter. Mix it in really well. Clean our side walls so we can have a beautiful window. Raise our rubber band to our level of sourdough starter. Let's cover it up. And another rubber band on top to seal that cloth down. So that's the end of day 14. Tomorrow I'm not going to double it. I'm actually just going to reserve what we did today, 640 grams, discard the rest, and then go from there. Today is Wednesday, February the 14th, Valentine's Day. I'm going to continue to do this until I am ready to make bread. So every day we're going to discard, reserve 640 grams, and add 320 grams of flour, 320 grams of water to keep it at this level until we're ready to start baking. We did it. It's actually ready to bake. When you feed it and it rises, once it hits that high point of rising, your sourdough starter is ready to start baking bread. So we fed it. Later on tonight, if I would have had time, I would have made bread with it. But I'm doing my feedings in the morning. I want to switch it to feeding at night so that it is ready for us in the morning to make bread. Does that make any sense? Because you want to feed it about 8 to 12 hours before you make bread. So if I feed it at night, when I wake up in the morning, it'll be ready for us to make our sourdough bread. So in the next, let's see, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. In the next 3 days, I'm going to be slowly changing the time to feed it at night. So come Sunday morning, it's ready for us to bake bread. So I left y'all at day 14. Day 15, we moved our feeding from morning to afternoon. Day 16, we moved it from afternoon to night feeding. Day 17, which was last night, we fed it at 9 o'clock at night. So we weighed out 600 grams of starter, threw everything else in the trash. We put in 300 grams of water, 300 grams of flour. And this morning, it's beautiful, it's active, it's ready. So that is how you make a homemade, from scratch, from the beginning, sourdough starter. On the next video, we're going to be making the things from our sourdough. I have a couple things planned, so please make sure you subscribe so you know when we upload a video, because the next one, we're using this sourdough starter. I'm so excited. If you don't mind, give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe. I would love to have you part of the Grammy family. If you have any questions about making your own homemade from scratch sourdough starter, leave a comment below and I will do my best to answer it. Right over here you're going to see 2 videos. Go check those out to the next upload, because the next upload is going to be really good. Until next time, y'all have a blessed day.